Milí televízni diváci, vítam vás pri ďalšej časti relácie Spojení oceánom. Dnes sa prechádzame v kampuse Pittsburghskej univerzity, pretože práve na tejto univerzite sa môj dnešný host učí slovenčinu. So I would like to welcome Father Richard Baker. Welcome. Would you like to say some sentences in Slovak to people in Slovakia?
Áno. Volám sa otec Richard. Bývam v New Yorku. Teraz som v Pittsburghu. Učím sa slovenčinu.
Thank you very much.
How's that?
Yes, it is. Why are you learning Slovak?
Well, I have, in the last year, had the great privilege of being assigned to the historic Slovak church in New York City, St John Nepomucene, which has been reformed and joined with two other parishes to be reformed to be a church that's not just ministering to Slovak people, but has a ministry to the Slovak community at large, and to be a home for the Slovak world in New York.
Mm-hmm. Is it the only reason?
I'm very privileged to have this job and assignment because I am of Slovak origin, Rusin Slovak origin. My grandparents came from Slovakia at the beginning of the 20th century.
Let's tell this story a little bit more in detail. How was it? Who was the last member of your family living in our country? How was it?
On my grandmother's side, she was the youngest of 14 children. All 13 brothers and sisters had already been sent over to the United States by my grandparents, my great-grandparents. And she arrived here at the age of 14. My grandfather came from the little village of Luchka, and he came over to join his sister who had already come to America. They met in the United States, in New Jersey, Passaic, New Jersey. My grandmother comes from the little village of Starina, Stalinobovna region of Slovakia.
And they met here, and they got married, they fell in love.
Yeah, and they got married in Passaic, New Jersey, in the what is now St. Peter and Paul Russian Orthodox Greek Catholic Cathedral.
When you mention Russian Orthodox, how was it in the family of your great-grandparents or grandparents with the faith?
Of course, as you know, those Catholics from Eastern Slovakia are primarily the Greek Catholic origin, Rusin. When they came here to the United States, though, they were met with a church, a Roman church, that did not understand them, did not understand a celibate clergy, a married clergy, because they were celibate, and certainly didn't understand the traditions and customs and ritual practices. So when they did approach the bishops here in the United States, certainly in Passaic, New Jersey, they were really limited. They were not allowed to have married clergy. They were also not allowed to have a church that even looked like what they knew in the old country. So after much turmoil, they were invited by the Russian missionaries at the time that were sent over by the Tsar to take care of the Russians in diaspora to join Orthodoxy. And so that church eventually then, 1909, became Orthodox. And that's then, I was then raised Orthodox. Even though my grandfather was Roman Catholic and my grandmother's Greek Catholic, that's where we ended up in the Russian Orthodox Church.
How was it then with your mother? How many children did your grandparents have?
They had 6 children. First starting in the custom of following the rite of the father. And so the first 2 were baptized in the Roman Catholic Church, but my grandmother decided that she was going to have her way too. They started alternating. So the next one was baptized in her church, in the Eastern Church, and then Roman Church, and then the next child was Orthodox, or in the Eastern Church, and she unfortunately passed away. My mother was born, she was baptized in the Orthodox Church. So.
How was it with the meeting of your mother and your father?
My mother, being the youngest of the family, and coming from an ethnic home, she did not speak English as a child. So it was a big struggle for her when she went to school, not knowing English. She really made an effort on really being American. So she, during World War II, obviously was a woman of the time, was out there working, part of the war effort, and of course she was much more active in the socially with Americans, outside of the more closed ethnic community that she was from. She met my father, who was from North Carolina, and she embraced his Americanism. He embraced her Slavic nature, and they were a good pair because they appreciated each other's background. And my father was the only non-Ukrainian member of the Yuki Club in Spring Valley, New York. My mother, she put cornbread on the table every night for dinner. You know, so it was these little exchanges of being American, and my father appreciating very much so my mother's background.
It's good to hear that he appreciated it, but still, in what culture were you raised?
My cousin and my mother, much raised in a much more American, secular, or Protestant experience. Because I'm the youngest of all the grandchildren, my grandmother passed away when I was 5 years old, and so therefore we lost any real connection to the faith and cultural expression of the family. And it was my realizing this as a child that I didn't want to lose out on what my brother, who's 13 years older than me, had gotten the privilege. But they all took it for granted. And they, like anybody, they were giving it up or not appreciating it, or not maybe fully understanding it. So I revived it for myself because I was also desiring the Lord and hearing the Lord's call in the most simplistic of ways as a child. And so I equated culture and faith, that they went together. And in who I was as a Slavish person, I wanted to preserve those customs and traditions that were in culinary as well as in religious practice. That makes sense.
As far as faith is concerned, in your childhood, what were some other influences?
Because my father comes from North Carolina, he came from a Baptist Methodist tradition. We, of course, spent many weeks of each year in North Carolina visiting that side of the family. So I had the experience of American Baptists, Methodists, Southern Primitive Baptists. But I also had on the Protestant side, my father's brother came to New York also and married a New Yorker. And their second son is closest in age to me. So we grew up together, very close. And he, as well as myself, heard the calling of God. He was Lutheran. They went to church, so I would go to church with them quite often. And so that was my experience. In terms of the Orthodox Church, it was really only people who died. We went to funerals, and we went to the liturgies for them, but we didn't practice it at all. So that would be my most of experience until I went to the Roman Catholic Church when I was 12 years old. Actually, I had experienced the whole neighborhood where I lived changed overnight. New York City, people moved out very quickly.
Why?
And from the urban decay. So they came to suburbia. And the neighborhood, which was basically all older families, the children grown. I'm the only child in the neighborhood. Overnight, they moved out, retired, and surrounded me but with ethnic Irish from Ireland who had immigrated to New York, and then they came up to own their first home. I went to church with them. And my first experience with the Catholic Church was 12 years old with them.
Could you tell us in a more detailed way about your way to the Catholic Church?
Well, my first experience of going to the Catholic Church itself at 12 years old was quite unique in the sense that my experience up to this point was, especially at the Lutheran Church, music, people, choir, singing, processions with banners and crosses and such. And my first experience at Catholic Church, 3 times the amount of people, but it was one lady singing 4 songs and a very enthusiastic, wonderful pastor, very important in my life, enthusiastically greeting the people, and the people really not even knowing what to say back. I'm like, oh, Catholics don't know how to go to church. Of course, the experience, of course, is so, it was not too long after the change of Latin into English, and in the Catholic Church, the experience was very different from the modern sense of we understand in terms of active participation. So, but what was different though, and what kept me going, was I knew right away the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. I didn't know it deeply, but I experienced it, I understood it. And that's been a moment to this day that I can say was the moment that said, I will remain in the Catholic Church. And it wasn't that I wasn't going to be Orthodox, it was the fact that God was leading me to this place. And I heard very clearly his presence saying, I'm here, stay here.
But when you mention music, music is important in church, isn't it?
It's so important. I had the privilege of being sent on for further degree in music to study at Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. I have a Master's of Sacred Music. And which we so lack our understanding of the proper use of a craft in church. Music is the most misunderstood. We use it to think that we're going to be more relative for people. We're going to make it more entertaining, more of an experience, and that is just so not the case. The liturgy itself is the experience that we're asked to enter into, where you're asked to use the craft to make that experience more profound so that the word can be more firmly rooted in our hearts and our minds. So it's not about what instruments should be played. Well, we know the organ is allowed because it replicates the human voice. So it really just fills what is already happening of the people singing. It is the tool then to make it a more profound expression. And our biggest mistake, of course, is to see the advancement of the craft be displayed in church rather than using the craft to do its job, to be the minister of the word, and to allow people to use music to lift up that word and not worry about style, but worry about what works.
Mm-hmm. Have you always wanted to be a priest?
Oh, always. My earliest recollection. At 5 years old, I said I wanted to be a priest.
And I know that your time in the seminary was connected also with your roots, or getting to know something about our country and your roots. So how was it?
Up to the time of the seminary, people asked what I was, I'd say Slavish. I never knew what that was, but I did know that where we came from were villages in the Czechoslovakia of modern time, but I didn't know there was anything beyond that until I was a seminarian assigned in the summer to a parish in Newburgh, New York. And there on the wall is a picture. It said St. Francis of Assisi, the German, Polish, Slavish Church of Newburgh. I said, I'm Slavish. I went into the kitchen where they were counting the collection, all the ladies and the men that were there, and I said, this is the Slavish church? And they said, yeah. I said, well, I'm Slavish. They said, so are we. And they said, but you can't say that. You can't say, we're Czechoslovakian. I said, oh, so I'm Czechoslovakian. No, you're Slovak, but you can't say that. That's how I found out I was Slovak.
Have you visited Slovakia since this time?
Have I been to Slovakia?
Yeah.
Yes, I've been to numerous times. Myself and one of my protégés, Father Matthew Ernest, who is Slovak American, we took a trip over there. And then I had a family trip. And after 30 years of trying to reaffirm who we are as a Slovak people and my family, I finally got it. My family, my cousins, all older cousins who really lost appreciation of it all, have regained appreciation of our customs, our tradition, and are very proud to say that they're Slovak Americans. Did a lot of work.
That's great. Is it difficult for you to learn Slovak language?
Well, I can say it's not English, it's not German, it's not Italian, not Spanish. It is difficult, but it is a wonderful challenge. And what motivates me is to help me be and understand the people I serve now, and understand myself in a modern sense, and my ability to connect to Slovakia, so that it's not just there and here, them and us, but that we can use our culture, our traditions, who we are as a people, to further the gospel. And of course that's very Catholic, because that's what our God did. God entered into a culture. God entered into a people. He didn't just take upon their likeness. He entered into their spoken language, into their cultural expression, into their traditions, into their customs, into the observance of the law. He entered completely into it. And he, in a sense, baptized culture, so that culture could be the vehicle that carries the faith. It's like I said about music. It is an understanding who we are as a people that will understand our God. And studying the language today helps me to understand our God and our Slovak people today. Not the romantic element of my remembrance of my grandparents and the way we did things, how we made things, how we observed traditions, but how it's done today. And how so much of who we are in Slovak Americans was frozen in time because we're cut off from our people because of communism and war. but now to enliven that and to allow God to use it to be more profoundly expressed for our people who are of Slovak origin, and to bless the rest of the world and maybe evangelize them.
So how are you trying to enliven that in the church where you are now?
Well, certainly it's a great challenge in New York because it's three parishes brought together. And it's a newly formed parish. And this parish is no longer a Slovak parish, but as a parish has a mission to the Slovak people. But as a Slovak, but it also has a mission to the English-speaking people. It has a mission to the people on Roosevelt Island, so it's very, very large and new. So hopefully I can fortify St. John Nepomucene and that property that has been blessed by the Slovak people for 100 years to be a place and center for Slovak culture and faith expression in New York. To be a home for the Slovak people, to know that in New York there is a slow place for them there. As well as be a birthplace for faith for the whole neighborhood, for all to come to know our God. And in some ways maybe to know it because they've come to know Slovaks. God's will be done.
What is maybe the most challenging thing for you working with Slovaks here in New York?
I think it's dealing with all the different levels. Those who came here 80 years ago, those who came here during communist times, those who've come here since communism has fallen, those who are English-speaking only, those who are Slovak-speaking only. It's a real challenge in terms of having everybody feel that they're part of the whole, and not feel that they are separated out because of a lack of something. Or
what do you like most about being a priest? What is maybe the best gift in it?
I love it. I love what I am. I love what I do. It's every day has been a challenge from God for 26 years. That it's a constant surprise that I've been invited into this. It's not a job, it's a life, and it's. I just like the being of it, because that's what it is. People get really confused, like in vocation, what vocation is all about. Whether it's married or religious life or priesthood, it's about becoming, it's about being, it's about doing. The doing comes later. And the doing is always revealed by God as you live in His will. And if you don't live in His will, He still works through the sin. He works through the failures as He works through the successes. And that's the amazing thing about our relationship with God, no matter what the vocation of life is. But if it's your call, I just say love it, as I do.
Father Richard, what would you say is the biggest burden of our people, of Slovaks?
Well, I joke to say, I'm Slovak, I know how to suffer, because we know how to suffer. I joke about it, but it is a real truth that we have suffered for centuries. But unfortunately what that suffering has done is it has produced in us an element of being afraid, of operating out of fear, and really what in a sense separates from our real ability to do God's will in the most glorious way. Now, I see that in our people in the United States who came with many burdens, and were burdened greatly over here, so it didn't get easier for them. But one of my great experiences of the modern day Slovak is they're being released from that. But the biggest fear I have is releasing that, they release God, as if God and the church is attached to those sufferings, but yet God and the church are the key to lead us out of the sufferings of this world, posed on us or caused by our own choices or sins. God came to set us free. Free from what? From sin. What is sin? What causes sin? Fear. Fear leads us into doing that which is less challenging, what is not right, because it seems easier.
Would you also be able to give some practical advice when somebody feels that, okay, there's a lot of fear in my life?
First is trust. Trust in God. Second is trust yourself. To love yourself, because if God has loved us so much that He came to live with us, live like us, that there's so much about us that's good already, and not in any way to try to figure out how I am according to the way they are. the next person, the world is, but to see how good I am in the sight of God. That is the revelation of his divine mercy. To say, you are precious in my sight. You are fearfully, wonderfully made. And to appreciate oneself. To then say, I do have ability to do good, to do better, and to make things better. And not to say, oh, look what we have to face. But say, look what we have to face. And what can we do with God to make it better than it was before? It's really a positive change in one's life. That's tough after centuries built into us thinking that we're not good enough, we're not strong enough, and tomorrow it will rain.
Thank you for these words. When we get back to Slovakia in this discussion of ours, what did you like most? Or when was the last time you were there?
I was there in October. Actually, myself and my staff, we flew to London to meet with the Slovaks in diaspora there and the Slovak ministry. We went to Rome to see Cardinal Tomko, to have words of encouragement. Then we went to Slovakia, and I had a great introduction to Slovakia from Bratislava to Košice, both the Roman Catholic Church and the hierarchy, as well as the Greek Catholic Church as well. And in discovering it, I saw, a wonderful church, but I also saw a lot of doubt coming into the people, or secularization of the people. And if I have anything to say to the people of Slovakia, don't give up on who you are, and who you are children of God. To walk with God, walk with his church. Don't be afraid to embrace what has been handed down to us, because that's who we are.
That's the identity.
It's our identity. We are Slavs. We are Slovak Slavs. We are Catholic, Greek Catholic, Orthodox. We are people who've been blessed and privileged. And we have probably much more to give than we ever would possibly think we have to give. And certainly, what I've encountered has made me more proud that I have Slovak blood.
That's a very strong message for our people, I guess. So I hope they will be all encouraged to live the identity more, because identity is very important, right?
It is, because identity is what God took upon himself when he became man. And never let us forget that. And if he came back, if he did it all over again, maybe he would choose to be Slovak. But
possible.
He could have. He could have. The point is, in doing so, becoming a member of the House of Israel, he became part of humanity. Becoming part of humanity, he became part of all of us. And then it's who we are, from where we are, to come to know who he is.
Listening to all these truths, we can only say how great is our God.
How great is our God. Yep.
Thank you, Father Richard, very much for your time now, but also for you learning Slovak, for you being interested in also your culture. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Vám prajem ešte krásny zvyšok dňa a ďakujem za pozornosť.